Hello, this is Michael Hexter, and welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. So, this episode is kind of a follow up to some previous episodes or recent ones that I've talked about the paradox of victimhood and victimization in new and old fascism. And in this, when I'm talking in particular about the flavor of fascism a la Trump, or the Trumpist form of neo-fascism in the United States, such as it is. And what I'm going to title it is, I'm saying poor baby Trump syndrome also affects mainstream media, law enforcement, and Democrats. So the immediate occasion for this episode are the recent headlines from the the Washington Post and the New York Times about Trump's indictment, and the most recent indictment for or legal, I guess you could say, okay, let's just call so recent indictment for the espionage charges, the documents case, basically. So anyway, so the New York Times headline that is interesting is Trump's case puts the justice system on trial in a test of public credibility. And then the Washington Post had a headline, or has a headline, that says Trump deference, all in what he's not charged with. Biden, Clinton, Pence cases in contrast. No issues over papers the former president returned. So anyway, so here we have both the Washington Post and also the New York Times twisting themselves into knots to try to take it easy on Trump, and also to basically not to stifle the impact of the indictment itself, which has explosive revelations about Donald Trump and his mishandling of documents after his presidency ended. And so and this stifling of the impact of this indictment and has, to me, the flavor of something that I'm calling the poor baby Trump syndrome. So everybody else, so basically in the poor baby Trump syndrome, and this is something that can be generalized. It's not just about Trump per se. Now, Trump is the paragon, or the epigony, or whatever it is, the shining example of, and the human instrument, so to speak, or the human antagonist, protagonist, whatever you say, of this particular dynamic in the public sphere, in our public life more generally, and he is, his personality, his celebrity, which he turned into a political personality, created this space, or opened up this space for an orgy of self-pity and of lamentation about one's being a target, being a victim, and then turning this around. So, with the paradox of victimhood and victimization, turning that around and victimizing other people. But what I'm commenting on more is these institutions have been coddling Trump, even as they criticize him and expose him and tut about him. They've been coddling him by not just simply treating him as another corrupt and criminal politician, basically, and who needs to be, if he is, needs to be investigated, tried, and if the evidence shows that it's the case, be convicted of crimes. Okay. And so and those are his choices. So what's remarkable about the indictment, at least the summaries that I've seen of it, I haven't yet read the whole thing or read the thing myself, that is that you see how Trump made his own bed, okay, in this documents case. So it was his action, it's his agency. But instead, we get from the Times and also from the Post supposedly this meta narrative is more important than this fumbling of or not fumbling, this weird narcissistic potentially treasonous activity by this the former president, and this and sociopathic activity. You know, in other words, all this sort of shocking detail of this, that that instead other people are to blame, essentially, or other people are really more responsible and are tending this man who is appears and evinces a big baby. In my opinion, for many years I've sort of felt this, and some people observe it. They have some people. There's a baby Trump inflatable, so forth and so on. That and this has been sort of been treated as kind of partisan or hyper partisan base level animus toward a man who is at the during his presidency occupied the highest office in the country, but so just kind of sort of back channel gossip and not particularly interesting. But really, that appeal of the self the self-pitying what I'm calling baby, or the sense of being helpless in the face of one's own drives and one's own greed and ambition and petty hatreds and so forth and so on, that all of that is excused, that he is not held fully responsible for that, because in some sense the media and the public sphere didn't really have a place for a person like him, or they had an image of him, that he was part of this kind of demi-monde, and then he emerged from that demi-monde to become the candidate for the Republican Party, and then won in 2016. But that's not fully the people who work for these large media organizations either see the opportunity just to basically get eyeballs by sort of a superficial account of his antics, but not really understanding what kind of a person is this, how what is his and then the actual real deeds that he's done that make him a danger for democracy, a danger for the United States overall, for our civilization, so forth and so on, when he's in a high position of authority, when he's in the presidency, or when the party is in his thrall and he's not necessarily in the presidency. And so there's not a real, the people who write these headlines and so forth and so on, and who run these media organizations, and also not only in the media, this is not only media criticism, that the Democratic Party has not fully been able to combat him. They've been giving, they didn't really take him very seriously, and they allowed him to skate on 2 impeachments because they held back, because they did not bring their A team, in the sense of now obviously fans of the Democratic Party will disagree, but they didn't bring the hard edge of reality of how corrupt Trump was, and to explain that to the American people in a way that made it would have made it politically extremely damaging for Republicans to not to try to not to vote for his conviction. I'm talking about the Senate, so forth and so on. In other words, to put the ball all into to put the pressure on the Republicans to disown Trump. And the first impeachment was laughably weak. The second impeachment was somewhat stronger, but still, and maybe they lacked some data and so forth and so on, but they were they really didn't press the issue hard enough. And but anyway, beside the impeachments, or those efforts, there continues to be a courtship with the Republican Party that is in the thrall of Trump, so forth and so on. They're not taking him quite seriously, or they see him as a bonanza for fundraising, for instance, because he's so hated by the Democratic base. And but anyway, so what I'm trying to point out though is that everybody is treated as being responsible rather than Trump himself for his actions. So Trump gets this pass for his action because he somehow is the playboy president, so to speak. That he's not fully he trails clouds of indifference behind him, so many clouds of indifference behind him, such a volume of clouds that everybody is swept up in this, or most people are swept up in this sense of indifference, now I'm not saying everybody, obviously the prosecutors are not, and there are people who are focused on trying to try him for his crimes in the Justice Department, and also in various state district attorney's office, so forth and so on, or local or city district attorney's office. But anyway, the overall, there is this miasma, you could say, or whatever, or this aura of, it's part of the aura, quote unquote, of invincibility that maybe is being penetrated right now by this indictment. In other words, that because Trump really went against the national security state, and which is, one of the sort of the kind of holy of holies of Washington, D.C., and also of the United States, and really, for some good reasons and some bad reasons. Okay. And anyway, that puts him really on a crash course between basically almost the entire edifice of institutions in the United States, in government and also in media, so forth and so on, and also for the American people, in the sense of if we our security is in some way contingent on our intelligence and military and so forth and so on, which partially it is, the way it's been constructed in a very, unpeaceful and imperialistic way. So it's not an ideal system. It's not a system that we should have built, and it's not the system that I want, and so on and so on. But anyway, even in that context, so Trump's actions were not helpful, even for the prospect of building a peaceful or peace-generating United States rather than a war-generating and a domination-generating United States, which it is. But anyway, so that action of his that put him in which I will maybe devote another episode to, that crash course, is a new development. But still, anyway, what I'm documenting here is this, still in these headlines of these newspapers, we have this poor baby Trump phenomenon, and that is something that I think evokes in people, and it's more that poor baby Trump. I imagine poor baby Trump appeal is also to his base. Okay, so his base. pities him as well as worships him and so forth and so on. He gives him permission to be as nasty as they want to be, and also as self-pitying as they want to be. And he is, in some sense, one of the people who constantly is talking in terms of about how he's, the target of this and that, and how his life is unfair for him, so forth and so on. And paradoxically, so it's not only that. That's not the only message. There are a bunch of different messages that are being sent simultaneously. He's a complex character, and he's a complex communicator, and he communicates not only with words but with emotions and with gestures and so forth and so on, and with his face, he's an actor. Okay, and so he looks petulant. He looks like a poor big baby often, and I think that evokes in. Even though, I don't really feel that myself at all, but that evokes in his base, maybe it's a litmus test for who is a Republican nowadays, or who is a Republican supporter, that this figure evokes this, maybe a little bit of protectiveness, as well as adulation and a sense that he permits them to be their bad selves, to be who they and to wallow in their grievances in freely and openly, and so relieves them of their sense of grievance and a sense of unfairness in life and in politics and so forth and so on. So anyway, so the poor baby Trump syndrome involves holding, and that's not only just poor, it's poor baby GOP too, and the base too. So there's a permission slip that is not only within the Republican base and the Republican Party, but also it's being this sense of responsibility of the non-babies, so to speak, we're the non-babies, we're the adults in the room, so to speak, the centrists, or I'm not a centrist, but the left, anything to the left of the Republican Party is considered to be responsible for these people. In other words, that we are and they're constantly, so there's a sense of entitlement to protection, or to not being attacked, not being held responsible for their actions, not being said, no, it's your aggression, it's your racism, it's your misogyny, so forth and so on. It's yours, it's not mine, and which is ironic in supposedly a quote unquote a conservative movement that's about taking responsibility, so forth and so on. They are totally unresponsive. They think of themselves as being not at all responsible for their emotional lives. Essentially, everybody else is responsible for their emotional lives except them, and their media outlets that are also believe that, and there are Democratic leaders who act as if they are the keepers of the Republicans. They are trying to keep the Republicans from doing too much harm to themselves. Okay, so like they are babies, okay, like they are, and that is something that I am trying to get the Democratic Party and also media outlets and so on and so on to unlearn. Okay, that they need to hold those people responsible for their own actions and their own utterances that are aggressive, that are treasonous, that are all different, anything that to expose them to their own reality, and also to tell the American people who are not involved, let's say the independents, or the they're not necessarily just independents, but they're also just non-voters, people who are not involved in politics. And some of that involves getting those people interested in politics in the first case. In other words, politics has become, or the way the issues that have been taken up in political discourse, or let's say the issues that matter most to American people, have been systematically excluded from political discourse because of the interests of the ruling elite, the donor class, in keeping American politics dumb enough and not effective enough, and blunting it enough so it doesn't interfere with their usage of the government and their usage of the economy and their increasing advantages in that economy, that they don't want the government to be clear and effective in dealing with social problems and dealing with the inequality in our society and dealing with the assault on our climate and the worsening climate, the catastrophic worsening of our climate, and they in terms of the heating of it, so and as well as the stabilization of it. Anyway, so they're happy to exclude those things. So anyway, so the dumbing down of our politics is obviously, and the constraining on issues that have kept, anyway, the group of people who should be more involved in politics has kept them more out of it. So it's become kind of this back and forth between these two quote unquote cultural groups around cultural issues. So and anyway, so which generally don't interest people very much. Okay, only the most politicized people are interested in those culture issues, or the people who are affected by quote unquote culture issues directly, or at least any given cultural issue directly, quote unquote cultural issue. So anyway, and they're not unimportant. I mean, many of those issues, but they are a distraction from the larger, big picture, popular issues that affect really almost everybody, or really everybody. So anyway, in general, but this the basically the poor. What I'm trying to elaborate in this video is that the responsibility, it's the Democrats are not responsible for Trump, and the Justice Department is not, in doing its duty to pursue criminal charges against the next president, is not responsible for the disruption that might happen in politics and so forth and so on related to that, and is not and they're not the caretakers of Trump in the sense, or the caretakers of, and they can't be held responsible for his actions, and that, for that matter, and that generalizes to all Republicans, not necessarily, Trump comes from somewhere. He is a sharpened version of Republicans from the past. George W. Bush, was also, acted in a way that as if he weren't responsible for and he's now given a free pass for the millions, or at least the million dead or so that are the product of the Iraq War, that was entirely his and Dick Cheney's responsibility. So in any case, there is a history of not holding Republicans responsible for their regression and their actions, so forth and so on. And so they do have a sense of entitlement to that. So they are so Trump grows out of that and is a manifestation of that, and is a particularly poignant, personalized example of that, and I think shows it more clearly. And so that we have to get out of the tractor beams, so to speak, of that sense of entitlement. So there is a a communication. If you want to get psychological or social psychological, it's projective identification or interpolation. It's basically fancy words. I could put some in the description box, some links to those ideas. But anyway, people in society cast other people in roles in relationship to them by talking in a certain way, by acting a certain way. And that draws people in who are susceptible to it. And often some of these newspaper editors and newspaper and media personalities are susceptible to it, as also it befits their, it's within the ambit of their corporate mission, so to speak, to, among other things, keep American politics harmless to the ruling elite. In other words, keep it out of the issues that are most important to ordinary people, and which would affect the power of the donor class, the capitalist class, or the billionaire class, if they were addressed effectively by government. So anyway, I hope this video, I'm going to stop here. I hope this video has some ideas that you can work with and that stimulate thought in you. And if you have some reactions and comments and objections or disagreements, please share them in the comments. Please like the video if it rang any bells or for you, and please subscribe to Politics 2100. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.